Deleted Session, July 17, 1972. Now, good evening. I have many things to say, and some will have to be continued, and barely begun this evening. First, we will begin with Nibi. He was a man of the strongest purpose, high dedication, a severe perfectionist who drove himself and his students. He was a mystic, but a mystic given to great discipline, denial, restraint. He inhibited many of his strongest drives in order to focus them upon his search and the work to which he was committed. He saw in his time how so-called mysticism and even dedication, without discipline, could divert energy, distort truth, and pervert causes. He was well aware that high energy could be dulled through dissipation. He dammed his own up, letting it out only in a deep, but narrow channel of his interest. He had little use for spontaneity. He was afraid of it. His methods worked very well in the transcription of his records, and purified his translations. He was afraid that spontaneity would cause him to color certain transcriptions from the past. His methods did not work nearly as well in person-to-person contact with his students, however. In dealing with this record, he was suspicious of creativity, for he feared it could lead to original alterations, where instead a literal interpretation was important. He was also, however, a creative man, so there were personality conflicts, and he literally forced the creativity to take a weak secondary position. The dilemma was, here now, between truths, a literal translation of ancient records, or a creative approach, which could lead to falsification. So he was highly suspicious of the creativity in himself. Through discipline, he thought that he had this suspicious creative will in hand. He feared that his students would not have the same kind of integrity. He was therefore very severe in dealing with originality on the part of his students, considering it, again, a threat. He was indeed a taskmaster. Now, when you met Ruber, and I will give you connecting points here, you recognized the strong creative abilities and appreciate them, encourage them, but within you, also through association, the remnants of Nibi roused themselves into action. The abilities were to be used. You knew that. The Nibi within you, however, was quite certain that they must also be disciplined, kept within bounds and watched carefully. The same applied to your own creative abilities, where for some time a divergence from a literal pictorial illustration was felt to be wrong, or off. Some other personal information that I gave you concerning your relationship with your father this time also fits in here. Now, Nibi was aroused whenever the abilities showed themselves most spontaneously in Ruber. Ruber recognized the Nibi within you when first you met. Jane was dancing quite spontaneously, incidentally, and to boot somewhat tipsy. She felt you aloof and disapproving of the waste of energy, watching but not swept along as the other males were. A part of you enjoying the performance, but a part, Nibi, critically wondering about the undisciplined use of such energy. In this life, Robert feared a laxness within himself, because of his mother's remarks about his father. He knew his own abilities. He feared he did not have the wisdom to use them wisely. They must be appreciated, but not spent foolishly. You appreciated them. The nibbing in you could be counted upon to see that they were not squandered. You did know Rupert in the past as nibbing, and she was then a dancing girl. Laugh at, when was that life? They said, this is in your life as nibbing. Let us get to the details in our time. You died, I believe, shortly after the time of Christ. That is, somewhere between 35 and 50 AD. You had a relationship of which nibbing did not approve, a sexual one. There were countless cults, and Rupert was a woman, was a prostitute priestess. The term is not a good one. Of a particularly sensuous cult that had a connection with the land of Constantinople. Rob noted Turkey. They said it was emotional, unrestrained, given to orgies. You were unresistingly drawn to it, the power of your inhibited tendencies propelling you for release. So you had a secret life, unknown to your students for some time. It erupted suddenly at the age of 45 and ran for 10 years. You had no respect for yourself during that span. Rupert was 9 when this began, usual in those days incidentally. Rob noted I was surprised at the age. They said, for some time in your relationship in this life, nibbing provided you with a framework to contain your own early emotions with your parents. In this life, you equated your own creativity with danger now, to some degree. In the first place, your father's creativity, his inventions, brought him no recognition, no money in your mother's terms. The creativity in your mother simply erupted in emotional tantrums, also dangerous and unproductive. You nicely channeled your creativity into comics, where it was socially acceptable and would also bring recognition in the terms of your society. Gosh. Here, nibbing within you rushed to your aid. He was appalled that your ability, while disciplined, lacked the intent and purpose, the search for truth and meaning. He felt being adulterated. Rupert, with high youthful ideals, a strong sense of purpose, then came into the picture. He was accepted by you and by nibbing. Nibbing felt the purpose would save your abilities. He had already spoken within you, rousing you to dissatisfaction. Rupert, who had led him astray in the past, would now lead you into high purpose and dedication. The two of you, Rupert and Joseph, had already made agreements, as you know. Nibbing, however, carried a grudge as Rupert does, or rather now as Jane does. Rupert does not carry grudges. Nibbing, while thankful to Jane, quickly let other aspects enter in once you had safely decided upon painting rather than comics, which were to him degrading. He was then afraid that Rupert's spontaneity would divert you from the course that it had set you upon, so he began to take a stronger hand. Part of the stronger hand also had to do with his attempt to help you with your family, to shut you off from too much distracting emotion. When, for example, you moved back to Sarah after New York. Ruber, however, reacted most vehemently against this shutdown of emotional reaction. He felt then the force that was Libin. Now, at times, his own overly conscientious portions would agree quite heartily with Libin's dictates. Because of his psychic abilities, he picked up these qualities quite acutely. They would often seem so different from your own actions at a given time that he became highly confused, and distrusted his own reactions. At a completely different level, of course, Libin and Sharabina do not ask for spelling now. Understood each other quite well, and she would taunt him. Now, regardless of what interpretations Ruber wants to put upon what I am saying, whether or not he wants to accept the reincarnation influence, the fact is that what I am saying has a psychological reality that neither of you can deny, and one that acts constantly in your lives. Now, I must speak through Ruber. I cannot, therefore, run willy-nilly without regard for his own psychological workings. On some occasions, therefore, his fears and defense of you would prevent extant material, and at other times, his fierce defense of himself would prevent it. His fear of the truth of the material, you see, fit in very well with Libin's tendencies, and so in certain ways, they also joined in alliance. Take your break. Ram noted, I told Jane that I had been considering the role Libin might play in our relationship in this life. For the last couple of days, I hadn't mentioned this to Jane, though in any of our recent long talks. Seth said, Now, I have much more to say. The Libin characteristics came particularly to the fore in the transcription of my book, of course, and with the encounter with your friend Sue. Libin was furious that Ruber would not speak for him. Libin wanted to speak through Ruber, knowing his abilities, and Ruber refused. With you, Libin checked the details of the book. This put Ruber under additional pressure, and he began to rebel more. You made some remark that the book was marred because of the great gaps in sessions, Ruber's attitude, and so forth. Ruber, therefore, felt that you were accusing him again of a poor performance, and for other reasons also, felt that in your eyes, this fault took precedence over the book's obvious merit. Because of the strain, and because he felt his spontaneity so hampered, he came up with Oversoul 7, defiantly, where Libin could not follow. Pure creativity, he felt, with no factual details that he could be called upon. A slap in the face to Libin, saying, Aha, I am using my abilities as frivolously as I dare to, and you will get little more from me. At the same time, he also felt guilty, and the book, 7, is filled with purpose regardless. 7 himself is characterized by a dislike for details, and a great disregard of formality. He is the epitome of Ruber's spontaneous self, frivolous in a way of speaking, but very definitely, quite of itself, filled with purpose, but free-willing. In the beginning, it was you who mentioned the rest of the page to 10. Do you follow me? Ralph said, "No." They said, after Ruber recited his first few sentences. Ralph said, "Oh, yes, the first page of 7. They said, but when Ruber merely began to write, you spoke to him quite sharply, reminding him that he was dropping other projects to embark on a new one at tense enthusiasm. You implied his objectiveness. Nibin is quite jealous of Ten's influence, such as it is. But again, Nibin let it be known he disapproved. Now, this had charge behind it later when you assured Ruber you were delighted with the project. You had no such charge." The charge registered a quick aside. Your friend Sue's behavior. She was kicking her heels up at Nibin also. Now, Ruber's own background this time, with ideas of truth and falsehood, tied in beautifully with Nibin. Nibin was as determined to get the correct reincarnational details, because they were in his turns true, as Ruber was determined to avoid them, because in his turns they were not true. Both of them had some qualities in common. Therefore, Ruber does not like to be held down by details. Nibin insists upon them. Ruber feels that details often get in the way of intuition. Nibin feels that they are sturdy steps upon which intuition must climb steadily forward. Now, your main failure in dealing with Ruber is an emotional one. You cannot reason with the part of him who felt hurt deeply, or to the part that felt he was rejected, in your attempt to explain yourself in the man. Now, you have tried to use logic and reason. When it was as I told you before, a feeling of being deprived emotionally, he did not feel deprived intellectually. You must reach him on the one level that you have been frightened of through honest expressed emotional feeling, and again, as I have told you often, through physical touch. I gave several sessions on that subject alone. The emotions and the physical body are so interrelated that one automatically affects the other. Ruber needs to be reassured on an emotional and physical level. He felt insulted on those levels. You have quite carefully avoided them in your attempts to clean up the problems. The muscles themselves cry out to be soothed. And the physical touch, the relaxation of muscle, brings about an emotional release. An emotional release brings about a muscular one. Now, give us a moment. You can raise your hand. All of these affected the sessions and your reactions to the entire experience. You think you will see many tie-ins. In the last month, you have not had sessions. None of you were satisfied. Ruber is quite deeply committed to them, despite all of these colorations, and so are you. He felt much time wasted, but held off, seeing if an absence from sessions would help his health. He had also resented the coercion that Nibin implied. Nibin was upset because of his own sense of purpose. Ruber knew this out would no longer give sessions because he felt forced to. Nibin had learned a thing or two. He was certain that given the chance, Ruber would throw the sessions over gladly. He did not trust Ruber's overall consistency. You see, part of the symptoms these last months have arisen and continued because of these ambiguities. Therefore, there was little consistent attempt made to reassure Ruber's emotional nature, or reach it on an emotional or physical level. Instead, you used reason. Secondly, the conflict over sessions. Ruber himself felt he was wasting time on the one hand, and on the other hand was refusing to be coerced. He also felt that you had already disapproved of Seth speaks, not understanding the nibbing connection. Take your break. Incidentally, it is also nibbing who cannot understand why Ruber's emotional nature cannot be reached intellectually. Now, your ideas of personality and time dictated your question. When you think of yourself simply as Ruber does, you limited your reality. Nibbing characteristics represent a portion of your reality. It is up to you to use those characteristics as best you can, and they can be very handy in what is a present life existence. The lives are simultaneous. In quite other terms, Nibbing wonders why he is bothered or hampered in his life situation. So devoted to detail and literal interpretation, by his strong leanings, temptations to him toward creativity and spontaneity. In whatever situation you find yourself, in whatever life, in course, there will be different focuses of abilities, conflicts of ability that are all challenges. You, as you are, have helped Nibbing understand the importance of creativity, and so has Ruber. And while there have been severe conflicts, understandings on all levels have occurred, and development. Understanding then, you can use the abilities as you want. Before, they seemed to have an energy of their own, almost at times not a part of you. And Nibbing experienced his own creativity as equally apart from him at times. You quite gladly used those disciplinary abilities, and they served you well in early years as a framework in which you handle your parents' situation. It is up to you to become aware of them, realize their value, but not allow them to black other aspects of your personality. The Nibbing characteristics were also of help in the early days of the sessions in several ways. But I do not want to get off the subject. When you are using them well, you think of them as quite your own. Ralph said, I'm just wondering when that is. They said, then you are not aware of them. They blend in with your purposes. Now, I will tell you that Ruber's Joseph in 7 is a very good approximation of another quite different life of yours, in which the emotions were given the fullest of sway, and you also have those characteristics to draw upon. They were warm, exuberant, using them, and you do have them. You will have no difficulty in relating emotionally in the way I suggested. In helping Ruber in this manner, you see, you automatically release portions of your own personality and abilities that have been replaced, and that is a portion of the whole situation. For other reasons, for one because Joseph was undisciplined, you have not spontaneously given expression to that portion of you. To help your wife, you can do so. I want you to know, therefore, that such emotional behavior is a part of your nature. I am dealing with your end of the stick this evening, because I had been blocked in the past from doing so, and the information is so pertinent. The emotional qualities will also help your own work, of course. Both of you will be freer with your feelings and in communicating them. Now, this is enough for this evening. Do you have a particular question? Ralph said, I guess not. Seth said, then we will close. Ralph said, it's been very interesting. Seth said, my heartiest good wishes, and I do the best for you that I can. Ralph said, thank you very much. Good night, Seth. Seth said, tell Rupert I said to think of this himself as simultaneous existence and forget the word reincarnation if he wants. For that matter, simultaneous existence is much closer to the truth of the matter. These personalities are alive in you now, as you are alive in them now. They are portions of your consciousness, your gestalt of being. They are individualized personalities. All of you draw your characteristics from the one entity that is the bank of your personality. Ralph said, good night, Seth, thank you. Seth said, now let me add several important points covered earlier. First of all, I have given you many sessions looking at the problem from different aspects. The suggestions given, all of them, followed consistently, and none of them were, or have led you through channels of understanding culminating in Rupert's recovery. Added there to reasons given this evening are such issues given earlier, as a concentration upon negatives, and the methods given earlier to counter those will also be of help. Rupert's feeling of helplessness added lately to his symptoms. Now, he personally utilizes programs and incentives. He needs his sense of purpose. In this particular situation, in the present, beginning sessions again is helpful in this context. The negative fears that he cannot perform, however, hypnotize the muscles. The positive suggestions are of great value with these necessary deeper changes of behavior. Do you follow me? Ralph said, yes. Seth said, the approach should be of loving encouragement. You can. Try, and I will help you. Not, you must. I simply wanted to give you at least some idea of the entire picture. Ralph said, good night, Seth, thank you. Seth said, the session, to answer Rupert's silent question, will work no magic by itself. It must be utilized. Ralph said, yes, I understand.